Okay, so this afternoon we have two exciting sessions. First of all, we have a career overview session. So we've got three speakers in the session. So Julian Smith from Rothamsted, we've got Pauline Jordan from the Animal and Plant Health Agency, and then Conor Gallinagh, who is from the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. That's DAERA, that's in Northern Ireland, not Defra, from Great Britain. So without further ado, Pauline, if you're there you are. I see.
Okay, I am there.
I see
Hello,
you.
good afternoon.
And if you can share your screen, that'd be great.
I think Ellie is sharing my screen.
Oh, okay. Ellie, if you can share Pauline's screen. There you go. Okay, so
Okay.
work perfectly. We look forward to hearing all about your blended role. So over to you, Pauline.
Okay, so hello, good afternoon, everyone. So like I was introduced, so I am part of the Animal and Plant Health Agency, which is one of the agencies that comes under the umbrella of Defra. And my role is a blended role of HMI, Horticultural Marketing Inspectorate, and also the Plant Health and Seed Inspectorate. Next slide, please. Just tell you a bit about myself. So my formative years were spent in Guyana. My parents are originally from Guyana in South America. And I've just put a picture of South America so you can see Guyana is on the top. That sort of red dot says above Brazil. You've got Venezuela to the left. So if you can see that there from the map, so that's Guyana. It used to be British Guyana. And so I spent a few years working there, and I was working at the National Agricultural Research Institute. So doing research mainly in pathology and also offering diagnostic services to farmers. The farmers would come in with any problems we had, whether they were pathogenic or bacterial, we would isolate and find out what it is and then offer advice to them. I returned to the UK in 1989. I went to Hadlow College where I did an NCH in horticulture. And from there, I went on to work at HRI Wellesbourne, Horticulture Research International Wellesbourne, on working on virology. I spent a few years there and then moved on to Y College because I needed to sort of improve my scientific knowledge and background and my horticulture. So I went along to Y College and did a, next slide please, and did a degree in horticulture at Y down in Kent. From finishing that, there was difficulties in getting back into research. And so I did a training program at then Sainsbury's home base in retail garden center management. Did that for a few years, and things sort of chopped and changed with family life. So I started working as an assessor, doing apprenticeships. As things progressed, I did some time visit an aunt in London who was in a care home living with dementia. And every time I'd go to visit, there wasn't much activities going on, not much stimulation for the residents. And so I would take down some flowers. At one time I took some seeds and I got them to sow some seeds. And all the other persons staying at the care home, they always seemed really keen and interested in what I was doing with my aunt. So I'd let them join in. So I mentioned to the care manager when I was leaving one day, I said, everybody always seems interested in what I'm doing. And, are you happy for me to bring something along every time I come? And she said, oh yes, that'll be fine. That'll be great to have another activity for them to do. So every time I'd go, and I remember taking herbs, and we would plant up herbs and we have a whole conversation going with them about what herbs they use. They use lavender for nice scented smell and helping them to sleep, and using rosemary for when they're cooking their lamb and stuff like that. So it's always nice and enjoyable. And so I looked into this. I thought, well, this is quite therapeutic. This is therapeutic horticulture, really. So I did some research and found that, yes, indeed it was. And so I went off to Atlanta and spent a few weeks there, did a program on finding out a bit more about therapeutic horticulture, came back to the UK and spoke to some of the care homes in my area, and then started doing this, going out and offering this therapy to residents living in care homes. And that sort of expanded, and in the end, it was a social enterprise that myself and 3 other people were running. That was going along nicely. everybody having good feedback, and it was very encouraging to see the difference that it was making to the residents. And then COVID came along. COVID came along, things changed. We couldn't go into the care homes anymore. And I was like, oh, what shall I do now? I need a job. I've got a mortgage to pay. And so I started looking to see what other jobs were available. And then I noticed the advert for the Animal and Plant Health Agency looking for plant health inspectors. And I thought, well, oh, this is going back a bit of what I did in my earlier years. So that would be quite nice to sort of going back to my roots. So I applied and I was successful in that. Next slide, please. So now working with APHA, Animal Plant Health Agency, we're looking to protect plant health across the trade for agriculture and also for the environment, doing various activities, which I'm just going to explain. Next slide. So what do I do as a plant health and seed inspector? Next. So it's very much about inspecting plants that have been imported, planting material, also produce that coming into the UK, ensuring that they're complying with our import regulations, also ensuring that they're not bringing in any pests that's not already present in the UK. We also do materials that's going on for exports. If you're exporting plants, exporting potatoes, we have to go out and check those, certify them, and issue a phytosanitary certificate to ensure that it meets the importing country's requirements. Also things that are conducted at different surveys at this time of the year. We're doing river survey, crop surveys, checking forests as well, and just trying to prevent the spread of pests and diseases in the country. Next, please. So from the imports point of view, so I visit the ports. I'm down in Southampton, so the main ports for me are Southampton and Portsmouth. And you can see in the photo there, we've got some lovely heritage tomatoes that are coming in, most likely from the Canary Islands. We've got bananas that tend to come from South America and come from Costa Rica and Colombia. And also we get some from Ghana, and there's some heritage carrots as well. Next. And this is just showing the cargo, how it comes in. So the ships would come in into the port. I would then get knowledge of what ship's coming in, what time it's coming in, and what are held in the containers, and which of those containers we need to see depending on what produce it is. It can be quite a busy area with forklifts flying around with the different products that they've got on board that we're going to inspect. Next. We've also got cargo that comes by airplanes as well, and that gets checked in London and at Heathrow by my colleagues. I don't get involved in that side, but just to show you the variety. They come by ship or they come by air. Next, please. So it's quite a range of material that we intercept at the port. In the photograph, we've got asparagus that came in from Peru, and that had the fall armyworm that was present, and we found that Spodoptera that was found in those asparagus, so those had to be destroyed. I'm also inspecting some tomatoes from the Canary Islands on the right-hand side picture, and that they're going to ensure that there's no harmful pest or pathogen comes into the UK. Next, please. In the slide that you're seeing, this is some hydrangeas, and this was at the garden centre chain. So they come into the garden centres and we go and visit them to check to ensure before they go out onto the shop floor, there's no pest or pathogen that's not already present. In this case, this was a Xanthomonas that was present that we didn't have in the UK, that was present on these hydrangeas. So these hydrangeas were put on hold, samples taken, sent off to the lab. And when the lab confirmed what the pathogen is, we then issue a notice to have them destroyed. Next slide, please. And this just shows where I've put a detained notice on them. So they've taken off the shop floor, put onto trolleys, put to the back of the garden centre, where they can be held until I get confirmation of what the pathogen is and whether they need to be destroyed either by deep burial, double bagging them in deep burial, or by burning. Thank you. Next slide. And that's just showing the evidence. So the garden center has to provide the evidence to show us that it's been burned and it's been double bagged. Thank you. And here it's a glass house with strawberries being grown. There's a crop of strawberries being growing. So checks are made on that as well. These would have been strawberries that are going to be exported. So prior to exporting, we do what's known as a growing season inspection. So we inspect them whilst they're in full growth to see if any pathogens or any pests are seen on them. So it's quite interesting to get a variety of tasks that we do, not just at the port, but also going out to the growing centers and seeing what crops are being grown, how they're grown, what procedures they have in place to ensure they're sticking to the regulations. Next slide, please. Someone's asking a question, which pathogen was responsible? Are you speaking about the crop as in the asparagus? If it's the asparagus you're speaking about,
No,
is
the question's about the hydrangea, Pauline.
Oh, the hydrangea is the Xanthomonas hoforum.
Mm-hmm.
Xanthomonas hoforum was the pathogen, yeah. Okay. And slides can continue now, please. This one is showing the garden center, and also we go to visit nice gardens as well. In the previous slide, you've seen it was a house down on the south coast. They've got gardens there, Italian garden. And so that's a nice part of the role where we get to see lovely gardens as well while we're inspecting what's growing. And also this one is the Manhattan's tea garden that's down in Bewley. So inspecting the boxes that are growing there. So yes, nice variety. Next slide, please. So that's the little bit about the plant health side. So on the flip side of my role is the horticultural marketing inspectorate side. And this is where I go to the ports to check on the produce that are coming in. There's a variety of produce that come in, like I mentioned earlier about the bananas, the tomatoes, carrots, a variety. And we check to ensure that the product is of a good quality. So if in your supermarkets, when you're buying your grapes or your tomatoes, if you look at the labeling, you need to look to see what country it's come from, what grade, what class. Is it class 1? Is it class 2? What size? So we check to ensure that those are maintained and those are correct. Because if the farmer is selling to the supermarket a class 1 product, we expect a class 1 product to be on the shop shelves. So we are checking to ensure that's maintained from a quality perspective, also that the labeling is correct, so the correct information is being relayed to the consumers. Next slide, please. So as an HMI, what powers if I have to prescribe the grades to ensure the grades are correct with the movement of the produce when the produce is moving from A to B, that they're moving because they are quite correct and in terms of the quality is correct. In some cases, if the labeling is not accurate, if they've missed out and they haven't said what the country of origin is, then I'd put a notice, I'd give a hole on that product and ensure that they correct it to say what the correct labeling it should be. Sometimes I may have to seize documents, equipment, or even the produce. So in a nutshell, it's just carrying out these conformity checks. So that's ensuring that compliance is correct and maintained with the marketing standards and with customs regulations that are in place. Next slide, please. So for labeling, we need to have the country of origin, we need the name and address of the packer, the name of the produce, the variety, the weight, and in some cases, post-harvest treatment. Like for example, with some citrus, they get coated in to preserve them. And so we need to know what is actually coated on the product. There's also the grading, so we can have from extra class going down to class 2. Extra class is really superior quality. We don't see that very often. It tends to be more class 1 and class 2. And then from a quality perspective, I'm looking to see, are there any skin defects? Are there any blemishes or any rots? How ripe is the product? And also in terms of grapes, for example, we look to see what is the sugar acid ratio. For example, the green grapes that you would buy, they are not as sweet as the black or the purple grapes. And so we check to see what the sugar acid ratio is for grapes. Thank you. Next slide. So a typical day would be logging onto the portal, checking to see what applications have come in. I download those onto my laptop. I then send an email to the port to request to inspect those products and liaise with them in terms of the delivery times. I would then arrive at the port or the point of destination of where those products are, and then process the arranged inspections. On completion of that, if everything goes well, I then release those containers and I then update the portal with my inspection results. Next slide, please. So this is a colleague inspecting bananas. So these are bananas, pre-packed bananas. This would look familiar to you. It tends to be those are the fair trade bananas that come in and probably going to one of the major supermarkets like Waitrose. Next slide. There's some defects that you can see. You've got some neck rot occurring there with the bananas. So those bananas we would definitely not be allowing to go any further, because when we inspect them, they should all be green and they should not have any rots, any neck rots, any blemishes on them. So a hold will be put on these. I would contact the supplier, the importer, and we'd have to resort that to get it, to bring it into conformity of where we need it to be. Next slide, please. This is a case of some citrus, and so these citrus have got ethylene damage on them. So they're again not allowed to come in. Thank you. And there's some limes. Limes, you can see them covered in fungal deposits and some rotting occurring there. So sometimes in the boxes, at the top of the box may look fine, and you think, oh, this is okay. But we have to dig deep down. We get down, we enter the whole box out, and then most times, in some occasions, you find rots at the bottom. Thank you. And just showing some more rots with the limes, and the picture to the extreme right is osteolysis, and that's occurring there with pest damage. So it's very important that we pay attention to this, because of course with your G&T, when you've got your lime, you use the skin of the lime and to get a nice flavor. So you don't want it, that needs to be looking in superb condition. So not good. Next slide, please. There's some blemish defects showing on Thompson seedless grapes. So there again, we would issue a notice depending on the percentage. Thank you. This was at a local market with some okras. So they came in and the boxes didn't even have the labeling, didn't have where their country of origin was. So at the market, we then stipulate what we needed to do to bring it into conformity. So on the left, you can see the orange label that I've placed on there saying it's a defect. And to bring it into conformity, the trader had to state what the country of origin is. So, you know, it hasn't got to be where he goes and prints out loads of labels. If he can, in this case, he used a pen to write what the country of origin was to bring it into conformity. Next slide, please. Looking at some exports that we do as well. So these are some potatoes being exported on the left-hand side. So we can see the quite big 1,000 kg bags, and we have to go open those, inspect those to ensure that the quality is right and that there's no amount of soil that's been exported, because the soil can be carriers for nematodes. And on the right, we've got some flowers. The flowers that have been exported. The ones that we do are going on to the cruise ships. So the supplier is sending them off to the cruise ships. We go and inspect them to ensure there's no pests and diseases on them before they go out. Next slide, please. There's also private exports as well. So just John Public might be exporting. In this case, it was a lady who was returning to France. And so she had her money plants or crassulas that she was exporting. So in order to do that, I'll have to ensure that there's no pest and disease on it. There's no soil that's attached to it. So I go along, check them to make sure she's washed all the soil off, and then wrap them into tissue and into plastic bag to secure them, to take them. And when I'm happy with that, then I issue the phytosanitary certificate. Next slide, please. Exports also go out for used farm machinery. Quite a lot of that gets exported to Europe. And so we go along to check there to ensure no soil is present. So there's no chance of any nematodes being present in the soil that's being exported, or also any spores from any growing crop. So it may be from, if wheat was or barley was infected and had any spores that were left on the tractor or on the combine, and that then gets exported, that could be returned. So I go along and check to ensure that it's clean, the machine is clean and in good state to be exported, and then complete the phytosanitary certificate. In this case, the guy in question, because I made him clean the machine again because it wasn't up to standard. And he joked and said he had flashbacks of his mom telling him to clean his room on Saturday morning. So I found that quite amusing. Next slide, please. So what, coming to the end of my talk now, I think it's important that in order to reduce any pests and diseases that are coming in, we need to look at eating perhaps more seasonal and relying less on imports coming in. At this time of year is quite good, where we can be growing stuff in our gardens. You know, you can be growing your salads, you got quick turnaround with lettuce, beetroot, and even you can even have your potatoes growing. So I try to encourage people as much as possible to do more growing. And even if you have community gardens, rather than sort of depending on imports, if we do more growing ourselves, then I think we'll be better off. Thank you. Next slide. So prevention is better than cure. I think ensuring the movement of plants and produce are monitored by the stakeholders, checking, and if they follow the compliance when they're importing and exporting, then that would prevent us having to sort of fight fire with any pathogens coming in. So inspecting the plants and the plant products at points of entry will help to protect our biosecurity. And also the enforcement of the marketing standards that we do for the fresh fruit and vegetables throughout the market trade, that would help. So coming from the warehouses right through to the supermarkets, if we can have that done, we're trying our best to do that, then that would help to control things. Thank you. And that's it. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pauline. That's really great. Both your very interesting career path and also the job you're doing at the moment. So what we're going to do is take questions at the end of everyone else's talks. So now I'm going to ask Jules to come back on.
So my career is in international development and spans 30 years. So in international development, I'm talking primarily Africa and that sort of thing. I did a degree in agricultural botany at Aberystwyth, and then a PhD at the same place. And at that time, I probably thought I was going to get a career at Rothamsted or an institute like Rothamsted working on UK agriculture. Well, it took me 30 years to get to Rothamsted as a science director where I am now. And this is the first time I've had to worry about UK agriculture. So what I did after doing my PhD on rhizobium was I got a job at Cabby. Just a point about my degree. I did agricultural botany, which was obviously a 3-year degree. I took 100% of my exams. The 100% of that degree was in 5 days and 10 exams in 1 week. So, just to give an idea how things have changed over the years in terms of how we do courses and get degrees and so on. So, how you measure people's success and careers and how useful experience is sort of an open question. So things have changed a lot in 30 years. At Cabby, I took on a project on bacterial wilt in Kenya, and you need luck in life, I think, and maybe luck is the wrong word, but bacterial wilt Ralstonia wasn't present in Europe, but it then got an introduction in Europe, in Holland, and was a quarantine disease. So the science that I was doing in Kenya suddenly became really fashionable in the UK and in Europe. And I did some very nice science at the outset. So I'll just quickly go through some of these things. So I did have a bit of luck in working on this bacterial disease, Ralstonia, which was set off in Kenya, because it came fashionable in Europe. And so we did a lot of science for the European context there whilst at CABI, and that put me in good stead. The other thing that I was successful at was in that I worked in the field doing field pathology, but also in the laboratory doing lab science. So that also made me sort of quite useful to project proposals. But one of the things that I'm really grateful for CABI was that from the outset, I got a permanent job, which is a real rarity, I think, in our world. So this postdoc type system that universities sort of predicate on and for career never really applied to me. And I also moved to FERA from CABI and did that again was sort of permanent positions. Those institutes run business, have a business profile or a business way of working, which provides better continuity in professional development of the staff than perhaps in the university sector. And also for here in Rothamsted, which is also very much around the postdoc sort of recruit, do 3 years and then hope for the best type scenario. So I have been lucky in life in that sense. The other thing that was fortunate for me, and I think this is a key message, is to have a good story about what you want to achieve. So at CABI, I received the first example of banana from Uganda with what turned out to be bacterial wilt, Xanthomonas musacearum. And at that time, it hadn't been reported outside of Ethiopia. So I reported back to the Ugandan authorities saying that this would be could be a massive risk to the intensive banana systems in Uganda. And that panned out to be true. And that got me into pest risk analysis, which is the link really with biosecurity and plant health. And I realized that the UK was super good at biosecurity. When you look at all the other countries and across the world, our island status has made that the case. And so I developed a career in trying to get Africa to be much more aware of biosecurity and to take on preventative measures for their own purposes rather than just for export into Europe or the UK, which is where the sort of emphasis on biosecurity was, not taking care of themselves, as it were. So the picture in the middle there of the banana system is the first pest risk analysis undertaken in Africa at a regional scale for a disease. And we sort of developed this capacity for implementing biosecurity, implementing diagnostics in Africa. That's been a mainstay of my career. So the pictures to the right are the design of a laboratory we set up in Nigeria for cassava testing. So these are the sort of things I've been getting up to in my career. If you do the next slide, I think some of the sort of things, the principles that I hold to is to work a process. I think, certainly in the lab, it's sort of 2/3 preparation, 1/3 doing, and I think that's fairly true in most things. So if you have a good story and you plan around it, then that can be a good way forward. Quality assurance around your work is also really important. I mean, people tend to think in research that you have to save money because the consumable budgets are low. I ran a lab in CABI and stopped people from trying to save money over trying to purchase the same reagents time and again, because if you keep to the same reagents, you retain the same results, and you have to value your time more than the cost of consumables in these things. So quality assurance and how you organize your work is really key, and that aligns with project management. If I ask the next slide, you have to back yourself. There's been times when you think, am I the only wrong, I'm the only voice in the room that has this view. Am I wrong, or is the world wrong? And sometimes, you're wrong, but quite often you do have a point. So, be confident in yourself. The other thing is to self-learn. I mean, no one taught me to do PCR. No one taught me to do pulse field gel electrophoresis. I didn't go on a course to do pest risk analysis, etc. These are things that are often out there for training, but there's ample opportunity to develop your own skills in these areas and just give life a go. And I think that's a key message is don't wait for someone else to let something happen for you, and be proactive and go out there and try it yourself. The other thing that I I think is important is that you remain open to other people's ideas and listen. So no one knows it all, and I'm always very skeptical of individuals who seem to have that knowledge of everything, because generally they don't. And I've often gained much more from a conversation by letting someone talk to me about what they know rather than me talking about what I think I know. And sometimes I, quite happily say I'm not very knowledgeable about some things when I do know quite a bit about things, just to hear other people's opinions and positions, because you get a better sense of perspective by doing that type of approach. So that's something that I've tried in time. I must admit, this is a career talk I gave at Rothamsted, and it's just I have no idea why I got a picture of Troy there, but it probably made some sense at the time. Can I see the next slide? So within the institute, be proactive, court consensus, try to win a crowd. Don't be an individual and upset people in your way, because in life, you always need people around you who are going to support your career, and you need to support their career. So I think as you work in an institute, that sort of sense of institute is really important for you to build. It's your sort of social capital within the institute. And people will probably say I haven't been particularly successful in that myself in some instances, and I could have done better to bring people together around the ideas that I have, because it isn't an easy thing to do, but it's something I think people could try to practice such that they do win favor and do get their opinions heard. And in that, the important thing is to be open to listening. And listening is really difficult. I find, especially as you get more advanced in your career, your ability to listen seems to fall off exponentially. But it's often the best thing you can do in a situation. And the next slide. So build your professional network, because the UK is a small place, and today we've got a community of people, but there's a whole masses of other people out there. And UK agriculture is too small for our technologies and our research. The really interesting science questions are global. Some of the best science questions are global, and some of the best science solutions are also sort of through international partnerships. We go to conferences, we make networks, and we have projects which have international partners. And I think it's very easy to lose the connections you have, especially in projects when the project finishes, and you have to make a concerted effort to keep in touch with people as your professional network. When the funding finishes, your reasons to keep in touch suddenly drop off a cliff edge. But you should try to maintain those connections as best you can, because they will come back, and they will create value in many ways. Next slide. I think it's pretty much the last one. So work-life balance, and we increasingly these days we talk about well-being. Mental well-being and mental health wasn't a thing when I was starting out. It wasn't talked about to the same extent. We did talk about work-life balance and that sort of thing, but not to the same degree as we do now. But it is important that you manage your workload, be open to acknowledge that when you're struggling and that you need help, and also to make sure that when things are important within your family, that you do prioritize those things above work sometimes. It's easy to think that your work commitments override other commitments. And in the instance of time, that probably does feel true, but in the long term, it probably isn't true, or certainly isn't true. So I think that's a good message for work-life balance. And I think that should say thank you after this. Oh, no, it won't. It's going to give you a nice picture, I think. Like, next slide. International development takes you to great places, and like these, and the next slide. And it will introduce you to great people. So if the funding's there for you to do it, I really encourage you to take this opportunity to get out and do work in other countries. Okay, thanks.
Thanks so much, Jules. That's a very honest chat. So thanks very much for taking us through your career there and giving some good advice. Okay, as I said, we'll come back for questions at the end. I see Conor there, so welcome, Conor. If you can share your screen, and then we can hear about what your career's been. One out of three.
Hi, everyone. My name is Conor Gallinagh. I'm the Senior Horticulture Advisor here in Caffrey, DAERA. I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of my role as a senior horticulture advisor, what we do day to day, and the involvement we have with the horticulture industry here in Northern Ireland. So to get things started, just to give you a little bit of a background to who I am and my career to date. I grew up in a family-run tree nursery and garden centre in the northwest of Ireland. I'm a third-generation horticulturist. My grandfather set it up in the mid-80s as a forestry nursery. My dad then took it over in the early 90s and transformed it more into native trees and hedging. And that is currently what we're doing. Alongside the family-run tree nursery and garden centre, we have a small farm where we run suckler cows and sheep as well. And this really started my interest and desire to pursue a career in horticulture. I kind of fell in love with the world of plants and wanted to follow and develop my knowledge even more. During my years studying, I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. My summer work included working in Oakfield Park, which is a private garden in Donegal, and it really gave me a huge sense of what else was out there in horticulture, not just production horticulture. The whole element of managing, running quite a large gardens and seeing the diversity of plants as well really sparked a huge interest for me. And then during my time studying in UCD, I did my professional work experience, and I really wanted to broaden my knowledge even further. So I worked with chagas, SRAM plants, which is a huge herbaceous perennial nursery in the south of Ireland, and About Your Garden, which is a landscape design company, and just gave me a bit more of a flavour of what was out there and where I could apply my knowledge as well. So as I said, I studied in UCD, an honours degree in horticulture, landscape and sports turf management, and I graduated out of that in 2016. And that really gave me the base knowledge and interest to go out and pursue a career in horticulture and see what was out there. And then during COVID, then I got the opportunity to study my master's in agriculture innovation in Galway. And that really allowed me to apply my knowledge that I'd learned after graduating to further my skill set and apply different areas of interest in horticulture and agriculture as well. Alongside that, I'm Basis in Facts qualified, and I have certificates in teaching and training as well. So the journey so far since graduating from UCD in 2016, as I said, I developed a huge interest in plants, and I got a job with the National Trust as a plant collections officer in Mount Stewart Gardens in Belfast. And this was a wonderful experience to further develop my knowledge of plant collections. They have a beautiful microclimate in that area, so they're able to grow really tropical plants that I had never seen before. And my role was to go around and map out the areas of the plant collections and identify the plants in different areas. Mount Stewart is a National Trust nursery garden, so they propagate a lot of the plant material and send it around to the other National Trust gardens. From that then, that was a part-time position, and I took up a role as a nursery technician in Chagas, Kildalton in the south of Ireland. I was there managing a commercial nursery and educating students on nursery skills from that. So plant propagation skills, nursery management, plant identification, and all those things. And this was a really fun role at an early stage in my career as well, because I got to learn with the students in certain aspects of managing quite a large commercial nursery, and also just to see students come in with kind of zero or no prior experience in horticulture and really blossom when they were there, and see them apply their skill set and enjoyment whenever they left as well. I left that role and came back home for a period, came back as a production manager and helped my dad run the nursery during the COVID time and just kind of develop it. But I kind of felt that that wasn't where I wanted to go, wasn't where my interest and skill set was at that time. And I got a position up in Caffrey and DAERA as a horticulture advisor, specialising in ornamental crops and cut foliage. And then in 2022, I got promoted to the senior horticulture advisor role in Caffrey, which I'll go through now in a little bit more detail in regards to what that role is. Just a few photos. The one on the left is the National Trust Garden in Mount Stewart. You can see the diversity of plant species that they're growing there. It's quite a beautiful garden. I would highly recommend visiting it. And the one on the right is a Dianthus crop that I grown in Kildalton with the students, which was really interesting to experience a crop of that scale and that kind of standard that I was heading into quite a large retailer. So the Senior Horticulture Advisor role here in Carfrey, what does that actually entail? So my role is to manage an advisory team for Northern Ireland. So we have advisors in different crop areas. So we have a veg advisor, fruit advisor, ornamental crops advisor, mushrooms advisor, and cut flowers and foliage. And we go out and provide knowledge transfer to production horticulture businesses here in Northern Ireland. And knowledge transfer could be anything from pests and diseases to business development, to grow medias, to crop nutrition. So we do this either on the ground where we're in the nursery talking to the growers over the phone or through online meetings. We also organize events, talks and study tours. So we identify keynote speakers that might be of particular interest to the growers or a particular topic that they want to hear about. We bring them over and we have an evening or a half-day session with the keynote speaker and share their knowledge with them. I oversee the technology projects development. So very similar to the keynote speaker, we would do a lot of traveling and we would attend a lot of events. We would see things that could be applied to production horticulture here in Northern Ireland, but there's maybe no prior knowledge or understanding of those technologies or innovations. So we would run small projects in Greenmount campus to see how these innovations and technologies could be adopted and applied to Northern Ireland. And as I said, I attend conferences, trade shows and talks to keep up to date with the current developments within the horticulture industry and to bring back that knowledge to the growers here in Northern Ireland. So just some photos of kind of the work we're doing, the events that we run and the growers and what we're sharing. So one on the right here is grow media trials that we ran over the last 2 or 3 years on peat-free to share the information with the growers in regards to some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that exist for adopting peat-free grow media. The one on the left is crop nutrition talk that we organized to discuss peat-free grow media and the crop nutrition that has to be applied to it. So the role of an advisor and kind of what I've learned since becoming an advisor is basis and facts qualifications are mandatory. Those are for advising on plant protection products and crop nutrition products. It's very much about applying your knowledge, your experience, and identifying trends. So having a prior bank of knowledge is hugely beneficial. As I said, I've grown up in horticulture. I've been in it since I've knee high, so I've kind of learned a lot. Even though I might seem very young, I've learned a lot over the years. And very, very important is to be able to talk to the growers at their language as well. It's about identifying some of this research, understanding it, and then being able to go out to the growers and be able to share it in their lingo. It can be hugely challenging, but it is very rewarding at the end of the day. You know, if you see a grower take a piece of advice that you've given them and see them use it and actually be a huge benefit to them. But it can be very challenging. Just to kind of wrap everything up, I guess, I just wanted to share some of the skill requirements that I've come across and some of the other bits and pieces from being an advisor. You know, communication is crucial. Relationship building is really important. Your networking and business minded and leadership are all crucial aspects of being an advisor. Critical thinking was something I learned during my master's, and it's been very useful to be able to apply that to the role going forward. You have to be incredibly adaptable and flexible. You have to be able to see from their point of view and adapt what you want to share with them to meet their requirements and their resources. Project management is one of the big things that I've actually really enjoyed in the role. You know, you're taking small project to fruition and seeing how it can be implemented on a business. Some other ones are strong organizational skills, an ability to prioritize, goal-oriented, and an unbiased opinion are really important. And always be thinking for the future, you know. If we sit still too long, then the future is going to pass us by. So it's very much seeing what's out there and trying to drive forward innovation and technology. Strive for continuous personal development to adapt and progress alongside ever-changing industry requirements is how I would sum this up. You know, I do a lot of CPD just to keep up to date and keep up to date with the challenges, the industry changes, and the trends that are going on. some of the photos of the work that we're doing, out with a brassica grower, out with an ornamental crop grower as well, and discussing the growing media requirements and peat free. As well as that knowledge requirement, you know, you need a real breadth of knowledge being an advisor. And one of the big challenges we have here is that you could be doing ornamental crops one day and you could be out with a veg grower the next day. So being able to apply what you might be able to use in ornamental crops to a situation in vegetables can be really beneficial to you. Some of the key knowledge requirements that I see that I'd be using on a daily basis is your crop production methods, soil and growing media science, pest and disease identification, nutrient management planning, growing systems and business development, knowledge transfer and writing technical material, all crucial pieces of knowledge that you will need to apply when you're an advisor. And as I said, we do a lot of traveling, so knowledge of international developments and how they might impact local business development is really crucial. And yeah, that's it. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, if you have any questions or anything like that there, I'd be happy to answer them as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Conor. That's really great to learn about. You've a varied career within a short time in across Ireland there, that's for sure. So we have a little bit of time. We're gonna run this session a little bit longer because of the technical issues. So if Pauline and Jules can come back in, and if anyone has any questions for any of our speakers, please either put them in the chat now or put a hand up, a virtual hand, and I'll invite you to join. I'm going to kick off. Pauline, your talk was fascinating to me in many different ways, but I'm gonna zoom in on one of the maybe the more challenging aspects. So if you are at either a port or you go to somewhere where there's been a delivery and you have to say to them, sorry, we can't bring that in. How do you manage if people get a bit a bit stressed about that and a bit confrontational? Does that happen very often?
Not very often, thank you. But I try and explain to them the reason behind it. The whole thing about the biosecurity. The reason I'm holding this is to protect what the UK basically. We're an island and we need to protect what's coming in. So, like in the case of the hydrangeas, is that we don't want that. Explain to them why we don't want that going out to the shop floor, because that can spread across across Hampshire or even further afield, which could impact on our economy and on the horticultural industry. From the point of view of the produce, they again explain to them the importance of ensuring the qualities of the good standard that the public could buy and it doesn't affect the reputation. And it's also because sometimes with the labeling, if the labeling is not correct, because the farmer is thinking they've sold a class 1 produce, but if it's not class 1 when it gets here, then there's some discrepancy there. So we need to ensure that's correct and that's maintained. So sometimes some people can be a bit initially, because like, oh, it's my I want to get my produce out, or it's affecting my profit or stuff. But when you explain to them the bigger picture and the impact that you can have on the biosecurity, they do sort of calm down and understand.
Okay. Oh, good. Yeah. Good. You haven't had to call in the police or anything like that
no, but because, and I guess because so when we put something on hold, it's a statutory notice that we would then issue, so it's all legally bound, and we deliver that to them, so they've got that in writing, so they know that it's not just me saying so or APHA saying so, it's got the legal binding to go with it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we got a couple of questions from Lucy in the chat, and maybe the first one's might be more relevant to Pauline and Conor, I would imagine. But talking about how important do you think a good plant identification skills in your career, and what else would you say was essential for a career in the plant health sector? Conor, can I come to you with that one?
Yeah, I think it's crucial to have your plant identification skills. I know for my role, when it comes to pest and disease identification, if you know the species and the variety that you're dealing with, you can narrow down a lot in regards to what might be affecting that crop. And it also comes back to, as I said, the grower lingo. If you can go out to a grower and be able to talk to them about the species and varieties that they're growing, you feel a bit more welcomed and they're a bit more open-armed about it. So they are. So yeah, I think it is something that is crucial, and I think it is something that I've seen in the last few years that is definitely lacking, you know, in regards to graduates coming out and plant identification skills. It doesn't seem to be held as high regard as previously been before, you know.
Yeah. Okay. And what about you, Pauline? Obviously, you encounter all sorts of different things in your crates, so I assume that's a very important skill to have as well.
Yes, yes, very much so. It's very important. The plant identification, especially using the botanical terms, because when produce come in from different countries, if they've just got the local name, and then when it gets here and we're trying to think, well, this is not that, it's, you know, it's something different. So it's quite important that the Latin name is used and the botanical name is used, and that we know what the botanical, because that's worldwide, and that stops any confusion with produce or plants coming in.
Yeah. Okay. So let me so move on to a question from Laura, and this is a nice easy question, I think. So the one thing that you enjoy most about your current role. So Jules, can I come to you with that? I know you manage a big team there at Rothamsted. So what is the most enjoyable? Probably not that actually, but what's the most enjoyable part of your role?
Yeah, I should say it's the staff. Yeah, I should. But I think the things I've enjoyed most in my career is the science. I mean, that's a bit of a mundane thing to say, but I've been involved in some really good scientific collaborations, and you know, I get my biggest thrills from that sort of aspect of the science. I mean, I always remember running gels and having the excitement of putting the gel under the UV and seeing the results. You know, that buzz that you get from getting the results from your research is a bit of a distant memory, because as your career progresses, you get further away from that front line of doing the research yourself, I think. But that's really what motivates me is to see people. I have to get that enjoyment out of other people's successes now. As I sort of manage people, I sort of parasitize on their success, which isn't quite the same, but still good fun.
Yeah.
So scientific excellence is really...
Yeah, I'd absolutely echo that it's so depending on, you know, everyone goes in all sorts of different ways in their careers, but keeping an eye on the science, and either whether you go to talks, as Conor mentioned, you know, you obviously have industry seminars and things that Pauline might be involved with, you know, staying close to what's the kind of cutting edge stuff is what makes things interesting, certainly in my role. So Conor, what about you? What's your favorite job at the moment?
I love the diversity that comes with my role. As I said during the talk, I come from an ornamental crops background. You know, that's all I've ever really known until I became an advisor, and I would get the opportunity now to go out to see vegetable growers and fruit growers and mushroom growers, which is a completely different side of horticulture that I've never been involved in. And as I said during the talk, you're learning so much being out with those growers that you can adapt and adapt to the other sectors that you're working with, and you can see how progressive their mindset is and where they're heading with their business. And yeah, I really enjoy just going out and chatting to them and seeing what way they're thinking.
Okay. And Pauline, yourself, what's your most enjoyable aspect?
For me, the most enjoyable is being out with the growers and getting to visit different garden centers, different forestries, the forest, and also different gardens, like the different RHS gardens. We visit those to check on the plants, and, you know, checking on the pests and diseases, ensuring that there's none present. So getting to go out and do that, be out in the fresh air, and the variety with the role as well. You know, like yesterday I was out walking through fields of oaks, looking to see if there's any oak processionary moth that's present out in the fresh air, doing that. Earlier today, I was doing 2 exports of farm machinery. And so it's quite varied in what I do. And I get pleasure from that, from being out with the growers, being able to talk to them and getting their feedback from, you know, horticulture and what they like about it and how we can help them to ensure that we protect the biosecurity. So that gives me a buzz from being able to do that.
Okay, so Eve has asked a question about are there any, you know, how do you manage to get a route into plant health or without any plant specific qualifications? And to be honest, there's not a lot of plant specific qualifications around unfortunately at the moment. So can you offer, maybe Pauline, you can offer some good advice on this, since, you know, you had a very varied route to get into your current role. So do you think plant specific qualifications are important for plant, or can you go another way to get in there?
I know we offer an apprenticeship scheme, so you can definitely go in that way. But so much these days, perhaps it's not so much important to have a specific plant education in terms of a NCH or NDH diploma in horticulture, but at least having a love for plants so you can understand the sort of biology of plants. That I think that's important, to have a little bit of grounding in science if you're not going through a sort of career progression path in horticulture as such. But having that, but I think so if you haven't got that sort of scientific background, then the apprenticeship is another scheme that you can get into, because then you have on-the-go training that would give you the skills that you need for plant health. And then there's specific plant health courses that some colleges offer that can help to support you in that way.
And so, Jules, can you offer any advice on that about, getting into plant health or plant science if you don't have any plant-specific qualifications?
I guess these days, the skill base that can support plant health is much broader than it was. So technologies tend to be platform technologies now. So chemistry is certainly a platform technology, as is biology. So you could move between biology sectors because you're good at molecular biology. You just have tools which you point at target organisms, and you do the science off the back of that. So I think there is scope at a technical level to apply a breadth of skills from chemistry and biology into an agricultural plant health context. It's obviously easier if you've got a plant health background to support that. I think if I look at organisations like DAERA, especially where I worked for 15 years, it wasn't necessary there to have a PhD to be successful. At Rothamsted, in plant science, in research, at Rothamsted, on an institute like Rothamsted, you're not going to get very far without a PhD. It's a different walk of life. It's much more academic basis of succession and career development. So I think there are different institutes that might be more appropriate and require be more accommodating for individual progression that's less of an academic bent, if you will.
So, Conor, I'm going to move on to the next question from Helen, which is about CPD, so continuous professional development. So, in your current role, how do you keep up with things that are going on, and how do you manage CPD in your current role?
So as I said, I'm basis and facts qualified, which requires 50 CPD points per year to attain and keep up. So that gives me great motivation to be able to go out and attend events and shows and conferences. There's kind of a drive there to make sure I get those points every year. And it's very much been out with the growers, and talking to them, and they tend to tell me what shows they might be going to or what it might be of interest to attend. As I said, I do organize study tours, and I do bring across keynote speakers from England and from continent, and they're sharing with me information about potential conferences or shows or talks that they might be attending as well. So you're just kind of keeping an eye to the ground and listening out to those things. And one of the very important things, and Jules had mentioned it during his talk, is networking, and building a network of people around you and being able to pick up that phone and ask those questions, about what's happening and where's best to go, and what do they think of this show, or what do they think of this talk, and is it worth it, and things like that.
Okay, cool. I should just advertising purposes, many of our AAB conferences are BASIS registered, so you can get BASIS points from doing those, and you can get that as an online registrant as well, so that can be a cost-effective way to maintain your BASIS. So Jules or Pauline, do you have any thoughts on CPD, about continuous professional development and where you go to keep yourself learning?
For me, it's just using the journals, and then you get the biologist journal, the RHS, the garden journal, and just having a bit of a profile on LinkedIn so you can keep in touch with things that are happening that way. And we have different conferences that we attend from time to time. And I guess with the beauty of technology now, there's so much out there that you can tap into to see what's going and attend it and pick up things that way. That's what I tend to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think in context, I mean, obviously, in terms of research, the way to maintain your relevance in research areas to go to conferences, to read the literature. You know, once you don't get further qualifications after that point, I mean, you obviously can become a professor, etc. But I mean, that's the one thing. But I mean, I do think these days there's much more of an emphasis on taking on training for leadership and management, on the cultural aspects of well-being and EDI, exclusivity, diversity, inclusion, those sort of areas. Those types of areas, people are looking for experience and demonstration of awareness in those areas when they're recruiting and promoting within an organization. So I would encourage people to think slightly beyond the topic of plant health and science and research, but into those sort of other softer skilled areas, if you want to describe them like that, as to make you a sort of more versatile individual who's understanding a wider picture of how an institute and society sort of functions. It's not necessarily the most enjoyable of areas if you're a researcher. It might not come the most naturally, but I think that's what people are looking for these days.
And on that point, so in the chat there, you can read that Jane Barbrook is from APHA has also added in a little bit of advice there about how you can do that. So I'm going to finish up with just the final question here from Sarah, which is about a seed scientist, and maybe Pauline will come to you, and if the others have got opinions after. But first of all, so when you're looking at seeds that are imported seeds, what is the kind of highest concern that you have in that sort of area? Is that something that you're involved with at all?
I'm not so much involved with imported seeds, but from the top of my head, I could just know that it would be ensuring that there's no, it's pure, and there's no pests or diseases is present in it. You know, when it comes, and we can send it off to the lab to get the checks done to make sure there's no weed seed mixed in, or no Chirogoma or any sort of pathogen that's in there that can affect the seed industry that we have here. But I'm not directly involved with seeds.
Okay. And Conor or Jules, have you got any opinions on seeds and seed health in particular? Anything you'd like to add before we finish?
Conor, do you want to go first?
Nothing to add in this one, unfortunately.
Jules, anything from you?
Yeah, so most of my work in Africa has been on seed systems, and I think in Europe we're incredibly lucky that we have a certification scheme that is well managed and monitors for pests and diseases, and a biosecurity system that supports all of that infrastructure, and an industry that goes along with that. In Africa, most of those things are either absent or poor, and if you look at all the large diseases that are spread, they're spread through seed. So cassava, brown streak, bananas, anthracis, wilt, maize lethal necrosis, all happened in the last 10 years, and have been a massive impact, and they're all spread by seed. And the thing that upsets me about that most is that if a farmer shares his seed neighbor to neighbor, then it goes a certain distance. But we have donor-funded projects which move seed across countries in a volume and across boundaries without biosecurity. So that's my big fear for seed systems and seed health in Africa, is that it's spreading disease and pests in a way which is sort of could be better managed by donors being more responsible and mitigating for the risks of plant health. So we have a job as plant health professionals, and FAO gets it, and many donors do, but they don't act on it well enough, because if it's emergency aid, they will neglect plant health and biosecurity, and they will move seed across a border and spread a disease on that certificate. So I think there's a role for us as plant health professionals to raise awareness within government circles as to how, when we fund projects that are involving seed movements, that plant health is at the top of the list.